How you guys doing today? Another video for you. Today is the day. We're going to pull the front suspension apart on this guy and see what I can do with it. So the weather is somewhat cooperative. As you can see, the sun is out. There isn't snow falling, and the wind isn't too bad. It might show up in this video, I'm not sure. We'll see how today goes, but I wanted to give you guys an update. Front bumper is about 95% finished. There's a couple little finishing touches I'd like to do, and you know, traffic likes to cooperate when you're out here in the middle of nowhere. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the front tires off, get it up on jack stands, and start taking a look and taking some measurements. I'll get some of that stuff videoed for you, and we'll see what we can do. As I said previously, I'm going to try and move this tire forward maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Give it a little bit more clearance away from the firewall and the body mount that's back in there. You can see I've already massaged it a few times. It's been smacked and cut and smashed, and I need to put some filler plate in there and do some other stuff, but I'm going to get to all that when I get into this. Probably going to try and finish up that lower skid, so we'll see what we end up with. I'm not going to try and extend my CVs. Before, when I did it on the Pathfinders, I had access to a TIG welder, I had access to a lathe, laser cutter. I had a lot better set of tools and access to a better set of tools, and I don't have access to any of that currently. So I decided that if there was a little bit of slop in the sleeve that I was going to weld over this and extend the CV just temporarily. If there's any slop in there, driving 60, 70 miles an hour down the freeway when we go back to Arizona, that could cause vibration, and it could come apart. And my wife is driving this vehicle as a chase vehicle, so I would prefer not to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to disassemble the CVs. I'll leave the stub axle in the hub and the stub axle in the diff, and take the shaft out, and just run it like that until I get back to Arizona. Once I get to Arizona, I'll probably order a set of extended travel shafts, just some chromoly ones to run for now, and see how well everything works, and if I still want to keep it that way or change it up later. But anyway, just an introduction video. I'll cut in some more clips of me taking it apart, making measurements, and talking with you guys. So hopefully I can get that done today, the weather permitting, and see what we can do. So in case you're wondering why I'm not taking the truck apart on the concrete pad here at my uncle's house, this is what we got going on. He's working on his trailer setup here, and you can see he's got his ramps out, got them lowered down, got the trailer up there. It's a good probably 4.5, 5 feet off the ground. That way we can get underneath here. So he was originally going to install a winch at the front of the trailer and run the line through the drop deck and all the way back here. And I convinced him that instead of fabricating brackets and mounts on the front of the trailer and do all that stuff, why not just install a nice hitch back here on this factory bumper for the trailer and use a portable mount for his winch and a jump box that he can store in one of his storage boxes and not have it out to the elements. And having the winch all the way in the back gives him a lot more range of what he can reach, and using snatch blocks and all that kind of stuff, he can really pull some stuff up onto this trailer. So that's what we decided to do. So he's using the concrete. We've been fabricating stuff. I helped him build this mount. This slides over a 2-inch receiver. It goes into there. We welded this guy on. It's all gusseted in. And then his fair lead actually pins. You can see the pins there that we came up with, and it mounts to the front of that mount. Pretty clever. We thought it was cool. My uncle's pretty excited about it. So anyway, that's why I'm not over here on the concrete yet trying to fabricate stuff on my truck. So I'll be taking the jack and the jack stands over by my RV and tear it apart over there. It's not that big of a deal. Little dirt doesn't scare me, so we'll see. So as you can see, we got it jacked up, pulled the tire off. I put the lug nuts back on my wheel spacers because any fathers know when you have little kids around, these guys tend to disappear if you leave them laying around. I bought another set, couldn't find a couple that were missing, and ended up finding them in the handle of my jack. So yeah, I always put them back on, that way they don't roll off somewhere, grow wings and fly, that kind of stuff. So we're taking a look at the suspension here, and in case you guys don't know, your lower control arm is basically 2 pieces of stamped steel plate. They're about, I want to say maybe 3/16 thick. Some of them are probably a little thinner depending on how they were hydroformed, but they're 2 pieces. They're pushed together, they're burned together, and then they add these little brackets and different stuff on, and they burn them in, and then they attach them to this rubber bushing back in here. So on my Pathfinders, I actually took these, cut these off, and then put in my own polyurethane kit to make it a little bit stronger, something that I could replace. These bushings are pressed in from the factory on Pathfinders and on most Toyotas as far as I know, and so they're, you know, they're like $40, and you got to press them in and cut these ones out and heat them up, and it's all kinds of crazy fun times to change these. I actually replaced the entire rear arm for the same price as what it would cost me to replace these bushings just by themselves. When I bought this truck, it had 230,000 miles on it, and the bushings were pretty worn out in here. The guys at the alignment shop, once I put these Ranchos on here, they didn't want to do an alignment on it because it just wouldn't stay in place and align correctly. So anyway, new lower control arms, but you'll also notice that the lower ball joint is a cast piece, and it's held in place by these 3 big rivets. So what I'm thinking is that I might cut these rivets out, knock them through, and basically rebox this section of the arm and move this ball joint mount forward probably about 2 inches, and then I'm obviously going to widen and lengthen the control arm about 3.5 inches. That way I can use any aftermarket chromoly CVD for extended travel. Shave this guy off, and I'll rebox him, and then the front here, probably what I'll end up doing is, because I'm moving this forward, I don't want to go farther than 2 inches farther forward, because I don't want to change too much of the steering geometry and the factory geometry that they have in here, other than extending it out and bringing it forward, because I don't really have a way to modify my rack and how it's mounted to the chassis right now, and that would be a whole can of worms. Relocating that, relocating the steering link, doing all that kind of stuff to try and change that geometry. So I'm hoping, we're going to find out if I can get away with just moving this guy forward. Won't change my bump steer, and the steering link will still work. Obviously I'm going to extend the steering link. I'm doing all this very cheap. I probably would not recommend somebody else copying me. I've built a lot of suspension stuff over the years. Obviously you can see from this build, I'm just making the stuff up as I go. I'm not going all crazy, having everything all laser cut and chromoly and doing all that kind of stuff. Can I do that? Yes. Can I TIG weld? Yes, absolutely. But you won't see me do that on this truck right now because I don't have access to those tools, for one. And two, I don't have a lot of time, and the weather here is not cooperative. I've been dealing with the new lifestyle and all this kind of stuff with my kids, and they're in school and all this. So could I grind all this stuff and sand it, make it all smooth and beautiful, and do nice clean welds and do all that kind of fabrication? Yes. Am I going to do it? You probably will not see me do it here. If someone was paying me to work on their vehicle, then the level of fabrication, the parts that I would use, and the tools that I would use would be on a completely different level than what you're seeing me do here. I'm using basic stuff. I'm trying to build this as cheap as possible because I may not keep it. I may wheel it for a year or two and then decide I'm going to build something else. So I don't want to fabricate and make like some SEMA build and be all crazy with my fabrication. I'm just trying to make it work. So that's what we're going to do. See if I like it. If I don't like it, then I'll change it. So the other thing that I'll probably end up doing here is I've got a piece of DOM tubing. It's fairly thick wall, it's 1/4 inch, and I might add it to the front of this arm as like a bash plate on the front edge. I've done that on the 7-inch wide arms that I did on the Pathfinder, so it worked out really well on that truck. So I may copy that setup a little bit on this one. We'll keep going. I'll disassemble some of this stuff, and then I'm going to look at maybe doing a gusset in here. These spindles are slightly different than the spindles on, say, a 4Runner or a Tacoma. The steering rack is in the back. On a Tacoma and a 4Runner, the steering rack is in the front. So that changes how you would gusset and tie all this stuff in. And then I'll go through and explain how I'm going to modify the brake lines, bracket locations, and my vehicle control stability sensor that comes down and ties into the back of the knuckle there. So I've got to figure out where to run that wire. I may run it across the top. I may run it back down underneath and behind the shock. I don't know yet. We'll see. It just unplugs from right here, and then I can take that piece and either extend it or reroute it to where when I increase a little bit of width and a little bit of travel, it won't interfere with any of the moving parts. So we'll have to see. Later on, once I'm back in Arizona and I have a little bit more time, I'll probably order up a set of maybe 8-inch travel coilovers, probably a 2.5-inch coilover that I can swap these guys out for. Probably right now, I'll probably mod this lower mount to where I can add a little bit of height, a little bit of lift, so to speak, because this shock will probably not handle the added weight of all my bumper work, my winch, and extending this arm 3.5 inches out is going to give the tire and a little bit of unsprung weight that will be here will have a little more leverage and a little more power over the shock and over the spring. So I may have to modify where it's mounted. I may have to bring it out on the mount probably 1 inch, maybe a little more, and maybe lift it up a little bit to get more of the ride height that I'm looking for until I can get some better shocks in here. So that's what we're going to work on now. I'm going to go ahead and disassemble some of this stuff and take a look at it and see what I can come up with. Well, as you can see, I pulled the suspension arms off, but today is a new day and the weather's not cooperating as much. Yesterday I was going to completely disassemble everything, but I didn't have the 35mm socket for the stub axle, so I had to go pick one of those up last night, and then by that time I got back, pretty dark outside, and so I continued this morning, got most of the stuff taken apart, and getting ready to cut the lower control arm. Back when I did the Pathfinders, both sets of arms that I did for those, I actually had a fixture that I made that located my pivot points and kept everything in place. I don't have the same access to a laser cutter, TIG welder, and all that stuff that I had before, so I'm kind of winging it this time. So I'm using a piece of all thread with some 1/2 inch nuts and washers to kind of put everything together and kind of hope that it'll hold it in place good enough to where when I go to put it back in there, it will still fit. So we'll see how that turns out. Well, as you can see, I got it put back together. Moved over to the concrete pad now that my uncle's trailer's cleared out. So still needs alignment. I was able to get it over here before it started to rain. So here you can see that I went ahead and moved it 2 inches forward, and the suspension is now extended out 3.5 inches. You can see I took the upper control arm, extended it with DOM, and then burned in. There's a gusset right here. It's a little dark, but lower control arms are just basically cut, boxed, and then I have internal ribbing that's all 3/8 plate that ties them, the front section to the rear section. And this shock mount is just kind of temporary. I needed to use it because of this shock. I'm hoping that once I'm in Arizona, I'll be able to get some decent coilovers to put on here and try out. The steering link was extended with a piece of DOM. And I didn't realize that at the time. I was hoping I could get away with not running my spacers, but I forgot that on Sequoias with the stock wheel offset, if you run a big tire, it'll rub the knuckle right up there. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and put them back on for now. Maybe get a smaller spacer, maybe just a 1 inch, or I'll have to look and see what I can find. But I'm gonna have to put the 2-inch ones back on here, which will make it crazy wide, but oh well. At least it'll work to get back to Arizona. Still got to fab up the lower skid plate here, and hopefully after the snowstorm that's coming in, as you can see, we got a bunch of rain today. The weather is kind of crazy. There's a big storm coming in, cold front, but alignment's a little bit off, but you can see that it's now 1.5 inches wider than it was with the stock suspension and just the wheel spacer. So put the spacers back on, that'll make it crazy wide, but oh well. I'm also going to install the CV outer cup and inner cups. I'm going to take the center section axle and everything apart. That way I can drive it. On the Pathfinders that I've had before, you could get away with taking the entire CV out, and the hub, you didn't have to worry about it coming out of the spindle when you drove the truck around. So on this truck, it looks like it's actually retained, possibly. I know that the brake caliper and brake rotor help hold it in place, but I think that because of the way I saw the hub pressed into the bearing and that inner race there, I'm gonna have to run that outer cup and lock it in just to make sure, because I don't want this thing to come apart when I'm driving down the road. So anyway, that ends the videos for today. Still got a couple other things I need to tie in and a few things to do, but it's getting closer. Thanks for tagging along and checking out the truck. And hopefully once I get back to Arizona, I can get with Victor and get some wheeling in and get you guys some videos of his Pathfinder that I helped him build, and keep it rolling. Thanks for watching.